Spoilers ahead for the Traitors US Season 4, obviously.
The Swifties will kill you.
Based on what?
Based on the clock.
Conga line, hide.
Bitch, not you know what the hell is going on.
Lisa.
Girl.
Girl!
Raina, you bitch. Too bad. Too bad, Caroline. Back to Dubai you go. I'm the smartest. Definitely smarter than you.
You, Jam Jam! Take him away, guy!
Lisa, what's Lisa kiss me?
Have been murdered.
Lisa kiss me. Lisa kiss me with the cheek. It was so strange because housewives don't kiss.
Jam Jam is toast toast.
And I know who it is. Johnny.
The Traitors US Season 4 recently ended, and this whole season kind of took me by surprise. I was a little bit disappointed early on when I saw a lot of the people I was most excited to see going home very early, and I was worried about what the rest of this season would look like. But I think along the way, not only was this season really entertaining, but I became really invested in rooting for Rob, as I think he did an exceptional job as a traitor, and I don't think I've seen a traitor gameplay this good since Surrey Fields in season 1, and now this is only counting for the US seasons. But I think what was really surprising to me is that I was not expecting somebody like Rob Roush to have such a gamer sort of mindset and to be able to play the game in a very strategic way while also coming out on top. So in this video today, I'm going to be taking a deeper look into Rob's gameplay throughout the entirety of this season and looking at all the moves he specifically made and how that led him to his win. In a way, it's going to be a little bit of a recap because I will be going through a lot of the major events of the season in chronological order, but I will be putting more of a focus on Rob in particular so I could talk about his moves and his gameplay and what led to his win. So with all that being said, let's just get right on into it. The season starts out with Alan naming a traitor right away in front of everybody, and we will come to find out that this traitor is Donna, but for the first few episodes, this is kept a secret from even the audience watching the show. Maura, who will become an important piece on Rob's chessboard, says immediately at the beginning of the show that she doesn't really know anybody in the castle, and she is also not really familiar with any of their TV shows, so she has no references whatsoever for who they are. The only person she does know is Rob because she has met him once before, and they are both from the world of Love Island. And this made it so easy for Rob to get in there and really build trust with Maura to the point where I don't think Maura was ever going to turn on Rob because he was the only person she really 100% trusted for sure. This relationship between Maura and Rob and Maura's immediate trust of Rob will become very important for later on in the game. Next, Alan chooses Lisa, Candace, and Rob to be the traitors. When they get into the turret for the first time, Alan will tell them that there is a secret traitor, but Alan doesn't reveal the identity of the secret traitor. So they are also unaware that Donna is a traitor at this point in time, and Donna is unaware that they are traitors. With the show's decision to name Lisa, Candace, and Rob as traitors, I was really on the fence about Rob as a choice at this point in time. I absolutely judged a book by its cover, I think. And it's not because I thought Rob was going to be dumb. Rob does say later on in the show that everybody thinks he's just this dumb guy from Alabama. And that's not really what it was. It was more so housewives I've seen in the turret before, and I know they can either be really entertaining or they can actually turn out to be pretty good traitors, as we've seen with people like Phaedra. But we haven't seen a Love Island person in the turret before, and usually when we have had Love Island people on the show in the past, they don't really give a lot of strategy and gameplay or even much entertaining TV within the show. So I was really surprised by the choice to include Rob. And because the other Love Islanders I remember on the show were like Ekin-Su and Bergie, and the only things memorable really about Ekin-Su and Bergie to me are moments that happened around them, like Phaedra saying, "Jesus Lord, not Ekin-Su," and also the whole "not my burgalicious" thing. So not knowing really who Rob was or not seeing his season of Love Island, I was really confused about this choice, and I thought it was kind of a waste of a traitor. I was like, he's going to be giving nothing in the turret, but I do think that production definitely saw the gamer mindset in Rob that we will see come out throughout the show, and he was an excellent pick. I will apologize to all the Rob fans out there because I really was upset within this first episode, being like, why is he there? He doesn't fit as a traitor. He's not going to be giving us anything. This is going to be so boring to watch. And boy, was I wrong. So I will say that right now. Within the first episode, Candace is already getting into a little bit of hot water when she kind of instigates this whole put it in a housewife's grave debacle, or situation as it will come to be known in this show. Candace kind of stirs the pot to try and get more people against Michael Rapaport. Now, earlier on, before the challenge, Michael Rapaport was grouping people together and saying things about the housewives as a group and the gamers as a group, and Candace didn't like that. So after the challenge, which involved the players picking people's graves to basically not be safe from murder that night, Portia was almost picked, but they ran out of time at the end of the challenge, basically. And Candace tells Portia in the car on the way back that it was Michael saying, put it in a housewife's grave, because she wants people to be scared that Michael has been talking up about the housewives as a group. Really, during the challenge, Michael actually didn't say this. Group kind of just picked Portia's grave because they were running out of time and her grave was the closest right there. But of course, this makes Portia upset, thinking that Michael is coming after her in the housewives, and it starts this whole debacle, and Candace is in the middle of it because they do question Candace, because Portia's like, well, Candace told me about this, and Candace denies that she said that. She's like, well, I wasn't talking about during the challenge, which she was, and I think in the show she even says that she was kind of trying to stirred the pot against Michael a little bit. But Candace is now already in the middle of something, so she's kind of already getting a little bit of a target painted onto her. Both Rob and Lisa clock this early on, worried about Candace drawing attention to her. Rob says that traitors should be flying under the radar, and Lisa says that traitors should not be drawing too much attention to themselves. We find out that the secret traitor only gets to shortlist players for murder, while the main traitors, Rob, Candace, and Lisa, get to pick from that shortlist of who is going to be murdered. So on both sides of the traitors, it's kind of not ideal. I would say Donna probably has the upper hand as the secret traitor versus the regular traitors because she gets to pick the pool of who will be murdered. So she is kind of in more control over things, and especially at the beginning of the game when there's so many people, there's a lot more options to choose from, so it works out better for her. Whereas Rob, Candace, and Lisa don't really have much of a say. They can only choose somebody that Donna picked, and maybe they don't exactly want to murder the people that Donna picked, and so it's a little bit more annoying for them. Also, because she doesn't know who the real traitors are, Rob does end up on the short list on the first night, and so that makes the pool that Candace, Lisa, and Rob can pick from even smaller. And because of this, at the end of the first episode, the traitors basically are choosing between Ian, Mark, and Eric as their only options, which I find so frustrating as there are so many people in the castle at this point in the game, but they only have 3 people to choose from. At the start of the next episode, we find out that the traitors chose to murder Ian. This is where I was really getting angry with the way the season was going, and I know it was only the 2nd episode, but first they named Rob as a traitor who I wasn't sure about, and then they're murdering Ian before we even got to watch him really play. I was so mad because there was a couple of people that I was excited to see on this season of the Traitors, and now I'm always a fan of the gamers because I watch those types of shows and I mostly know who those people are. So I was really excited in particular to see people like Ian, Rob C, and Tiffany, and they will all leave the game very early within this season, and I was so upset about it, especially with Ian, because I think Ian is so smart, and I was excited to see him play as a faithful because I think he could have played a really good faithful game in terms of being able to suss out who the traitors were, but we never get to see any of that because he is the first murder, unfortunately. However, as a move from Rob's standpoint, murdering Ian was a really great move for him because at the beginning of the game, I think there's only a handful of people that I think would not have been followers of Rob. And we will see throughout the season how Rob really gains people's trust. He charms people and everybody loves him and they kind of want to follow his lead. And I think Ian is one of the people that would not have done that. And I think Ian is one of the people that could have had his suspicions of Rob as the game moved forward. So murdering Ian right off the bat and getting rid of one of the biggest threats to sussing him out was a really great move. So I have to give Rob the credit, even though I was upset about it at the time because I was mad to see Ian go so soon before we got the chance to see him play. In this episode, it is shown that Tiffany is actually one of the first people to start to become really suspicious of Donna, but as the episode moves along, we start to see that pretty much everyone in the house starts to gain these suspicions against Donna because of the way she's acting. Not only is she being way too quiet, which is always suspicious to the other faithfuls, but she won't talk game with anyone. She won't say any names. Really, the only person she talks to is Ron, and she says it's because she feels comfortable with Ron. But as a traitor, she is not doing great in the moment because people want to work with her and want to talk to her, but she's not giving them anything, which is causing her to look suspicious in their eyes. Portia is also somebody who is under a lot of heat at this time because not only was she in that argument with Michael over the put it in a housewife's grave thing, but she keeps having a lot of slips of the tongue saying things like when we killed Ian or there's definitely 4 traitors. And in a game like the Traitors, especially with Portia, as people were already getting suspicious of her, you cannot have any type of accidental slips of the tongue because people will use anything as evidence against you at the round table. So it is not looking good for Portia at this moment. And we will see at the round table, although there was a lot of suspicions against Donna, Donna kind of gets saved by the shift over to Portia as people bring up the whole put it in a housewife's grave thing with Michael, although I think Portia really didn't deserve the heat for that whole situation because that whole thing was started by Candace really, but Portia is the one that kind of takes the heat for it as she's the one who really got into the argument with Michael. And also Ron wants to stand up for Donna, so he shifts the attention over to Portia at the round table and tells everybody about her slip up saying that she killed Ian and all that other stuff, which leads everybody to shifting their vote onto Portia. Portia is banished. Obviously, they find out she's a faithful, but because Ron was pushing so hard for Portia at the round table, he will now become the next biggest suspect in the castle as people are thinking he was using it as a distraction and he could be a traitor. And because of this, Ron will have a hard time moving forward in the game, as once people are suspicious of you, every single thing you do becomes heavily scrutinized, and we see that happen to Ron within the next few episodes of the show as everything he does becomes suspicious. After this, the traitors will get a note that they will have to murder in plain sight that night. Donna has already picked the people she wanted to shortlist for murder, and now the traitors will have to obtain the shortlist in public as the show hid these cards behind a painting on the wall. It's this whole thing. This is kind of where I first started to shift my opinions on Rob, as this is where we first really get to see him play strategically. This is where I first really saw that, oh, he's actually smart in his thinking and he's willing to take risk within his gameplay. So Rob is the one who retrieves the cards while the other traitors start a conga line distraction, which is actually crazy that nobody was suspicious of this random conga line happening besides Rob C, of course. And I do want to talk about Rob C because rest in peace, he was gone too soon in this game. He was probably the person I was most excited for because I have been a fan and listener of Rob Has a Podcast for quite some time now, and Rob Sesternino is the titular Rob of Rob Has a Podcast, and I was so excited to see him on reality TV because not only do I know that he's really smart, but I also know that he cares about the fun entertainment value of these sort of shows, and I knew he was going to be somebody that wasn't just going to sit back and stay quiet, but he was going to be somebody that did stuff because he wanted to entertain the viewers, you know what I mean? And Rob becomes really suspicious in this moment with this whole conga line thing happening, that the traitors are trying to cause a distraction to murder somebody in plain sight. And he's correct about this, which is crazy. And so Rob is hiding in the other room because he doesn't want to be a part of the conga line, and he's being so careful. He goes to other people and tells them that he thinks somebody is getting murdered in plain sight, and he's telling people, don't hug anyone, don't touch anyone, don't take a drink from anyone. And it is going to be so depressing when we find out that the traitors will decide to murder Rob in this moment. And it's happening in plain sight, kind of. It doesn't happen because they do anything to Rob. It's just that the traitors have to burn Rob's card while everybody is out and about in the castle. So it ends up being kind of ironic that Rob was most scared of the murder in plain sight, and he was the one who was most cautious about it, but then he ends up being the one who actually is murdered because of it. I hated to see Rob C go because I thought he was so smart, and him clocking the murder in plain sight just proves that he's another person gone too soon. And as we will see in the episode, Rob R pulls Lisa over to the chessboard to discuss who they are going to murder in plain sight, which some people said wasn't smart, as some people said it would look suspicious to be playing chess in front of everybody. You had to have known something was going on. But from what I've heard about the castle in particular on this season is that Rob was playing chess a lot with people, especially with people like Ron and stuff. So him turning to Lisa and saying, let me teach you how to play chess, was, I think, a smart thing, as he was already seen playing chess with people, so it wasn't suspicious, and it was a way for him to talk to Lisa in front of everybody about who they wanted to murder. And I think Rob is kind of the one who ultimately makes that final decision and pushes Lisa towards agreeing to murder Rob C, because Rob R knew that Rob C was very smart like Ian. He was getting rid of the people that were not likely to follow him or to be under the spells of his charms, and the people who would probably be likely to sniff him out in the long run. And we know this because Rob said this after the fact of the show. On Watch What Happens Live recently, Rob said that Rob C and Ian were what he saw at the beginning of the game as his biggest threat. So he wanted to get rid of them right off the bat. And I think early on, Rob really knew how to set himself up for success later on in the game. He was thinking ahead. Not only was he forming connections with people and getting them onto his side, he wasn't one who was speaking out and being the leader of the faithfuls, but I think he was getting in with enough people that people were trusting him and believing that he was part of the crew, one of the faithfuls, while also, as a traitor in the turret, he was getting rid of the people who weren't going to trust him and follow him as easily as everyone else. And these moves of getting rid of Ian and Rob C, while I didn't like them as a viewer, I think for him, this is already setting him up for the end game success that he will have. In episode 3, Rob has a moment where he says he suspects Jam Jam or Michael could be the secret traitor, and he doesn't believe that it could be Donna. I found this funny because maybe this was a little bit of insight to how Rob would have played as a faithful, and maybe he's not the best at sniffing people out, but he was good at being a snake, I guess. In this episode, Rob also clarifies his choice to murder Rob C, saying that the longer Rob C stayed in the game, the bigger the threat it was to the traitors. Rob also says his decision to murder Rob C was in hopes that things could fall back on Michael, because Rob C voted for Michael at the round table, and he thinks now maybe it would make Michael somebody who everyone is already looking at because he's been this loud distraction. People are going to be looking at Michael more as somebody suspicious because of the way that Rob C was murdered. Michael and Jam Jam get into an argument at breakfast, and this only puts more suspicions onto Michael. Michael is extremely annoying and he's getting on everyone's nerves. And although everyone doesn't think that Michael is a traitor, they do think that he is a bad faithful because he's getting on everyone's nerves. He's causing a huge distraction to the rest of the faithfuls who are actually trying to suss out the traitors. In a little bit of an interesting twist, Alan tells everybody that there is going to be another roundtable happening before the next mission. Before the roundtable happens, it seems like everybody is the most suspicious of Donna and Ron, but they really want to stick to their guns on Donna because they were suspicious of Donna the night before, but they all changed their minds based off of some stuff that Ron said at the roundtable. So now the plan is to go for Donna, and if they find out that Donna is a traitor, it will only just give them more ammo to go for Ron in a future roundtable, because they think that maybe Donna and Ron would have been working together as traitors and Ron was trying to protect his fellow traitor. At the roundtable, in order to try and save herself, Donna does bring up the Rob C voted for Michael to try and put heat on Michael, which is exactly what Rob R wanted to happen when he chose to murder Rob C. Also, before this roundtable, Rob says he wants to be one of the majority and to vote with the sheep. Here we can see early on how Rob is building trust with the other faithfuls. He's not being somebody like Colton who is trying to really put his foot out in front as the leader of the faithfuls, but he does want to be seen as somebody who is working with the group and who is trustworthy. I think he is doing a good job of being able to lay low while also feeling like he's part of the group. He is working to suss out the traitors, and he's not being too quiet to the point where it's suspicious. Michael is causing more distractions at this round table. He starts this whole "if you're a traitor and you know it, clap your hands." Everyone is so done with him at this point, and I think it's this that leads everybody to make sure that they stick with their original Donna vote, as they can see that Michael is once again just distracting them away from what they're there to do, which is to try and suss out the traitors. So with all that being said, everybody votes for Donna basically, and we find out that Donna was in fact a traitor. After Donna's banishment, Colton claims that he led the troops to take out Donna. He is really trying to take credit for this Donna banishment, which I don't think really goes to him. I think everybody since the first episode was suspicious of Donna already, and it wasn't really Colton that got everybody to flip their votes onto Donna, but he's trying to take credit for this because I think he really wants to be that archetype of the faithful, the Pilot Pete and Dylan Efron kind of archetype, if you will. I think Colton watched those previous seasons of the Traitors and he wants to emulate that style of gameplay at the "I'm the most faithful person here and I'm telling everybody who to go after," but He's just so annoying when he does it. And I was annoyed too when Pilot Pete did it. When Dylan did it, I wasn't as annoyed. It's not my favorite archetype of player overall, but I don't think Dylan was as annoying as like Pilot Pete and Colton are. And especially Colton in this season, he really wants to be seen as like this really smart guy who's taking people down and who's leading the charge and everyone's following him. And it just kind of gets annoying after a while, especially him trying to take credit for this Donna thing when the whole castle suspected Donna. But with all this in mind of Colton's archetype, we see that Rob and Colton kind of buddy up early on. And I think this was a great move for Rob, as Rob didn't have to be that leader of the faithfuls at this point in time, but being close to Colton, one, Colton was never going to turn the tides against him like Colton does against some of the other faithfuls that he's so sure are traitors. So Rob getting close to Colton made him kind of safe from being a target of Colton early on. And it also made people view him as, oh, he's working with Colton because he's trying to suss out the traitors. I think working closely with that sort of archetype made him look more faithful to a lot of the people in the rest of the house. During the challenge, Maura and Rob pair up together, and Maura says again that she trusts Rob the most and that she knows that he's not a traitor. So we see early on that Maura is so sure on Rob, and this is so important for later on in the game, as Maura trusting Rob so wholeheartedly will guarantee that not only will he have this defender if anybody does bring up suspicions to her on him, but if he can bring Maura to the end game, he has a locked in vote with him. Building that trust with Maura early on was one of the best things that he did for his game. We also find out after the challenge that the traitors will be murdering somebody face to face. In the next episode, because of the face to face murder, there's a lot of interrogation going on at breakfast, as the people that were up for murder were blindfolded and tied to a tree while the traitors walked around them. So there's a lot to question these people on. Ron is suspicious of Maura because he heard light footsteps, so he assumes one of the traitors is her because she's so skinny. And Lisa was also one of the people that had to be tied to the tree, although she wasn't, obviously, because she's a traitor, but she gets questioned a lot during breakfast, and she's very over the top and dramatic with the way she tells her story. But she does mention that one of the henchmen had an axe, which Ron didn't mention, so this makes the other players even more suspicious of Ron, because they said, well, why didn't Ron mention that the henchman had an axe? And like I said, once people were suspicious of Ron, everything that he does and says will be heavily scrutinized. So this is just another thing that probably would have not meant much if it were somebody else, but because it's Ron and people are looking for evidence to support the fact that he's a traitor, everything is always getting turned against him. They will also say later on that they think he was putting on an act at breakfast time to get people to feel sorry for him. Then we find out that it was Caroline that was murdered, and we flash back to see the face-to-face murder, and this is one of the funniest face-to-face murders to happen on the Traitors. This season was really delivering on entertainment value, and Lisa is hilarious in this scene.
Winner, you bitch. I thought we really bonded. Too bad, Caroline. Back to Dubai you go. I'll see you out of this, I'm sure. Somewhere, like BravoCon. No, you won't.
Colton is once again saying that he led the charge to get out Donna, and now he's setting his sights on Tiffany. My personal opinion and theory on why Colton suddenly decided to go after Tiffany is because Tiffany is a smart person who is really good with strategy elements, and she's also not afraid to let everybody know what she's thinking and to try and get people on board with her plans. She's thinking 3 steps ahead, and she's letting everybody know what they should do. And I think Colton just didn't like that because he wanted to be the leader of the faithfuls. He really wanted to be that Pilot Pete archetype. And I think the reason why Colton will now suddenly shift so hard to go after Tiffany is because he doesn't like that Tiffany is this threat to him as the person that controls the faithfuls and tells everybody what to do. So Tiffany is telling everybody that she thinks the traitors are Ron, Jam Jam, and Michael, and she thinks that they should go after them in that order. Colton is going to use this to go after Tiffany at the round table, saying why is she thinking 3 steps ahead and telling everyone what to do. And while I don't think he was the one who led the charge to get Donna out, he is going to actually lead the charge to get Tiffany out, because before this, nobody was really suspecting Tiffany as a traitor. As Colton's ally, Rob says that he's fine with Colton gunning for Tiffany because it's more protection for the traitors. So once again, Rob being so close to Colton was a great move, because when you get one of these episodes where Colton is suddenly shifting the attention onto someone else, not only is Rob one of the first people to get that information on who people are going to go for at the round table, but Rob can gauge whether he needs to step in or not. And Rob is going to take a step back and let Colton go after Tiffany, because that doesn't affect him in any sort of way. And also, Tiffany is another gamer who is really smart. She fits that type of player of people that Rob wanted to get rid of early on because they were threats to sussing out the traitors. So if Colton is going to go after Tiffany at the round table, Rob should have no problem with it, because I fear Tiffany might have been high up on Rob's murder list. And now I don't know if that's true, but just the fact that the traitors already killed Ian and Rob C, and Tiffany is another person that I think was not going to be a follower of Rob in the long run of the game. I don't think she would have been as charmed by him or part of his little cult of people that were ride or die for him. So Colton just suddenly deciding to push for Tiffany to go just really worked out in Rob's favor at this point in time. I think he kind of got lucky with this, although he could have murdered Tiffany later on if he did view her as this sort of threat. And I think he would have. So at the round table, Colton really pushes everybody against Tiffany. He brings up that she had plans to go after Ron, Jam Jam, and Michael, even though a lot of other people were suspicious of those 3 guys anyway, but apparently it's a crime to strategize and think ahead. But anyway, Colton and Tiffany kind of get into it at the round table, and Tiffany is so entertaining to watch because she really comes for Colton, and that was fun for me to watch. However, unfortunately, the final nail in Tiffany's coffin that really sways everybody to going along with Colton's plan to vote her out happens because of Eric. Earlier in the episode, Eric was one of the people that were tied up to the tree for the face-to-face murder, and Eric swears that he heard a laugh, and he swears that that laugh is Tiffany. Now, Eric is very wrong about things all the time, which is hilarious. There's a scene later on in the show where he says, I recognize his handwriting. It's obviously Johnny. And it's like, was not obviously Johnny's handwriting. So he's telling everybody, I heard a laugh and I know it was Tiffany. And because Eric is a musician, and Eric even does cite this, like, I'm a musician, I have a great ear. The man with the magic ears, as he will come to be known, he convinces everybody to vote for Tiffany because everyone says, well, this is the first time Eric's really speaking up and he's really so sure about this. So Tiffany must be a traitor if Eric swears he heard Tiffany laugh. Obviously, it was not Tiffany's laugh, and Tiffany gets banished at the round table. Ron kind of skates by here because everybody has been suspicious of Ron for a while now, but between Colton pushing so hard for her and then Eric's final little piece of evidence, Ron was saved here because a lot of the people that were a little bit on the fence were swayed by Eric's evidence. And after Tiffany is voted out, Rob says in the turret that Tiffany was the smartest person for them to banish. This kind of confirms my theory that Tiffany was probably high up on Rob's list to murder at the early on point in the game because she was not going to be a Rob follower. Although this was not really Rob's doing, it worked out in his favor. It was a little bit of luck that Colton would suddenly decide to go after Tiffany so hard, but it definitely worked out for the traitors, especially especially for Rob. At the beginning of the next episode, we see the traitors discussing in the turret about breaking up their pattern of murdering housewives and gamers, and we will see that they eventually choose to murder Monet, which kind of doesn't break up the pattern in my opinion. Monet is not considered a gamer, but with Monet coming from Drag Race, which is a competitive show, and maybe it's not a social strategy type of show in particular, but I do think Monet has a lot of social strategy skills, and I think this choice to murder Monet is also taking out another person who is smart and who has the ability to be a big threat to the traitors down the line. We also see that one of the big reasons for taking out Monet was because Monet was starting to get suspicious of Lisa. He tells Candace his suspicions of Lisa in the prior episode, and Candace then informs Lisa, which only gives them more ammo to murder Monet to take him out of the game. I do think Monet had this gamer mindset, so while it is breaking up the pattern of taking out housewives and gamers, they're still getting rid of a gamer type of strategist person, in my opinion. Thankfully, in this episode, people are starting to get suspicious and fed up with Colton, as he was the one to really lead the charge against Tiffany. Nobody else was really that suspicious of Tiffany before he started going around besmirching her name. So some people are thinking that Colton could be trying to cause all these distractions because he's trying to get the heat off of the traitors. Also, Kristen says that Colton doesn't play the game like a faithful because he doesn't play the game like a team player. She says that he just wants to tell everybody to vote the way he wants, and I think she's correct in this assessment. At the next challenge, Alan tempts the players with shields, but he says if no player takes a shield, then all the players will be safe from murder for that night. So it is really on the traitors to try and convince maybe the other players to take a shield or take a shield themselves so they can murder somebody that night. But the players do end up all sticking together, which is unfortunate for the traitors who don't get to murder somebody. I just don't know why none of them were pushing harder to convince somebody to take a shield, because I mean, there was people like Colton who really wanted a shield. There was other people that were not trusting of the other faithfuls in the house, saying that they thought somebody else would take a shield, so maybe we should just take one too. And if I was a traitor, I would definitely be hyping up those people, saying, yeah, maybe you should just take a shield. You can't trust these other people. But I don't know, the traitors didn't really do that, so everybody will end up being safe and they won't be able to murder anybody. Then there's this funny scene of people asking Rob how he feels about Michael, and Rob just goes, "It's Michael." Meanwhile, Michael is walking by and he overhears this, but because he has been kind of in some tiffs with Colton lately, he assumes that it's Colton that says this, and he just storms in the kitchen and starts yelling at Colton. And we see Rob laughing in the corner as Colton is getting blamed for talking about Michael in the situation when it was actually everyone was talking about Michael, and it was Rob that was talking in the moment. It is really funny because I think it just goes to show the way people trusted Rob. People never really assumed the negative of Rob. They always assumed that he was this great guy, this nice guy, faithful. He could never be a traitor. He's trustworthy. It's definitely not Rob. And even in moments like this, we can see that phenomenon happening as Michael comes in and immediately starts yelling at Colton. And was Colton talking about Michael earlier and stuff? Sure, but in this moment, it was Rob, but Michael does not assume that Rob would be talking about him. I think this moment shows a little bit the way that people even subconsciously viewed Rob. At the round table, we get this really great scene that also puts me into the camp of liking Rob as a character on this show and really rooting for him and realizing that I was wrong in my initial opinions of him, because there's this scene where Michael is really going at Colton, and he apparently is a fan of alliteration because he's coming up with all these words like conniving Colton and stuff, and he keeps saying commiserating, and he says it like 800 times, like
commiserating Colton, commiserating Colton.
And Rob, who hasn't really spoken up at a lot of the roundtables prior to this moment, decides to make one of his first big moments of speaking up at the roundtable to be correcting Michael on his grammar. And it was such a joy to watch. Rob just shouts, "Oh my God, commiserating means to feel sorry for someone." And Michael goes, "No, it doesn't." Rob is so frustrated and he says something like, "I'm sorry, it's driving me nuts." And I wanted to stand up and clap because me too, Rob, me too.
Commiserating. Colton.
Commiseration means to feel sorry for someone.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. I'm sorry, that's driving me nuts.
It was driving me nuts. And I'm so glad he said it. I think it's such a funny moment within the show, and it made me like Rob even more. And it also showed that Rob would not be afraid in future episodes to really stand his ground and hold his own or bring something to the round table. During all this chaos at the round table, Ron has been telling people that he thinks the traitors could be Michael or Dorinda. Where he got Dorinda from, I have no idea, but I think that's just such a funny out there suspicion. Nobody is really listening to Ron in this moment because Michael is causing, once again, way too much distraction at the round table. He makes a comment against Colton that is uncalled for and really puts everybody even more off on Michael, as not only has he been annoying and a distraction this entire time, but now he kind of made this personal attack. It did not come off good for Michael, and people are just so done with him at this point that they decide to banish him just to get him out of the game. I don't think a lot of people really thought he was a traitor, but he was definitely a bad faithful, and with him out of the game, it opens up the board for them to really focus in on sussing out the traitors. After the round table, Colton is now starting to talk about his suspicions on Lisa. He tells this to Rob, who at this point, Rob says that his priority is to the other traitors, so I do believe he wanted to help Lisa and tip her off in this moment, but he also realizes that he can't help them too much. And I love that Rob is thinking ahead, and although it does seem like he wants to work with the traitors for the most part in this moment, he realizes he can't push too hard to keep Lisa because it would only make people more suspicious of him in the long run. He's being very cautious in the decisions that he makes. And I do think in recent seasons, we've seen a lot of traitors just going after each other instead of kind of working together. And I don't mind that the traitors go after each other, but I think a good strategy, especially at the beginning of the game, is to work with the other traitors and bring them along. So in the end, you're not the only traitor left standing, and you do have some shields in front of you when the right time comes. Especially in season 3, we saw a lot of just traitors going after each other right away. And I do think that Rob is thinking in this sort of mindset where he does want to work with Lisa and Candace and keep them around as long as possible. But he realizes if people are going to be so suspicious of them, he has to take the step back and let what's going to happen to them, because if he tries too hard to protect them, it will only make him start to look suspicious. And Rob will warn Lisa later in the turret that Colton is starting to come after her. We also get this moment in the episode of Johnny talking about Rob, saying he's so hot I can't even look at him. I think this is a bit of an important point to bring up, as a lot of people have been talking about pretty privilege in the way a lot of people viewed Rob, and how Rob being conventionally attractive to a lot of the other players made him automatically seem trustworthy, or made them automatically gravitate towards him, want to be his friend, want to work with him, all this other stuff. And I saw some psychologists even talking about the halo effect and how people find conventionally attractive people to automatically be innocent in a lot of ways. And I think all this talk is so interesting. We will come to see later on that there was a couple of people that were so completely charmed by Rob. So I think everybody was completely charmed by Rob? No, but a good amount of people were, and Rob knew how to keep those people around. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on when I talk about Dorinda and her post-season interviews. But I do think it is interesting to bring up, because I would say there is a little bit of an advantage there, even if it's subconscious. People see Rob and he's somebody that they wanted to work with and be around. I do think he probably is generally charming because he charmed a lot of people. I think his general demeanor also had a lot to do with it, but I'm not going to say that his looks didn't have anything to do with the way that some people were so charmed by him. Even subconsciously, I think it could have played a role. There's been a lot of talk about this in general, and I find the whole discussion interesting. I thought it's kind of important to bring up this point in particular because a lot of people have been talking about this after the fact of the show. In the next episode at breakfast, the players find out that nobody was murdered because nobody took a shield in the mission the day before. In this episode, we see a little bit more of Rob's relationship to Ron. Rob opens up to Ron, saying that he thinks people just view him as this dumb guy from Alabama, to which Ron hypes him up and says that people don't view him like that. I think Rob genuinely likes Ron. He likes talking to him and hanging out with him, and I think he really relates to him as an introvert. Rob feels bad that as the next largest suspect, Ron has been cast out by the rest of the people in the castle, and as I've mentioned earlier, everything Ron does or says is heavily scrutinized and looked at in the negative light, with people trying to figure out if this could be a clue as for Ron being a traitor. And I think it's only just made Ron feel more on the outs with everybody, and Rob feels guilty about that because he genuinely likes Ron. And we will see how this comes into play later on, where I think Rob makes a little bit of a move that's more emotional because of his connection to Ron. We also see Johnny is starting to try and strategize and form this sort of super alliance in order to have the numbers with the faithfuls. I believe he was trying to get Tara, Mark, Steven, Kristen, Candace, Eric, Maura, and Rob to come together in this alliance, as he had thought that they were all faithfuls. Colton continues to gun hard for Lisa. Rob says it's not going to look good on him if Lisa gets voted out, and he was sticking up for her, so he's really towing the line, trying to play it as cautiously as possible. I don't think he wants Lisa to go, but I do think he knows that he can't really stick his neck out for her. So when Colton asks Rob in front of the other people in their car if he thinks that Lisa could be a traitor, Rob does answer that it's plausible. Johnny is getting annoyed by Colton, as some of the other people are, and he wants to gather his alliance to go against Colton at the round table. It was established in the turret that the plan for the traitors for that day was going to be to get everybody to banish Ron, and then they could murder Colton at the next murder, except for in a conversation in front of Steven with Lisa and Candace, Rob says that he is starting to think more and more that Ron is not a traitor. And this is an emotional move because I just think Rob doesn't want to see Ron get banished. But of course, Lisa and Candace are fuming because the plan was to go after Ron. And if Rob is not going to go after Ron with them, who is he going to go after at the round table? Johnny tries to pull Rob into his alliance to vote out Colton, except for Rob is extremely hesitant. He says he cannot go after Colton because it would look so bad on him to write Colton's name down after working so closely as an ally with Colton. He also says he doesn't want to write Ron's name down either. So here we are starting to see that Rob's emotions towards Ron are putting him into a little bit of a pickle, as now he feels like he cannot vote for Ron and he obviously cannot vote for Colton. This roundtable is a bit of fun chaos because Colton is receiving heat from Johnny and the gang that were planning on going after him. Lisa is receiving heat from Colton, and Ron is still receiving heat because of everything leading up to this moment. And people are still bringing up the Portia vote, okay? Ron has now basically given up at the roundtable. He says that the only way he can prove to everybody that he is not a traitor is just by letting everybody banish him and see once and for all. He goes around and starts saying nice things about everybody, and everybody watching Ron give up is now starting to change their minds as they are starting to feel bad for Ron, and now they're thinking, wait, maybe he's not a traitor. Rob states publicly at this roundtable that he doesn't think Colton is a traitor. Then later on, he will state to everybody that he also doesn't think Ron is a traitor. This puts Rob in a bit of a mess, as now, if he votes for either Ron or Colton after saying he doesn't think that they're traitors, he is going to look bad. It makes it so the only option he has left to vote for is Lisa. And I was really worried at the time when Rob was making this decision, because I was thinking, I know Rob likes Ron. Everybody is already suspicious of Ron. Rob could have just kept quiet about not thinking Ron was a traitor and have just went along with the group to banish Ron. And I don't think Ron would have taken it personally, as everybody was suspicious of him for a while now, and it looked like Ron was kind of ready to give up and go. But because Rob stated so publicly to everybody that he doesn't think it's Ron, now he can't vote for Ron and he can't vote for Colton. And I was worried if Rob voting against Lisa would cause some troubles for him later on. And we will see how he is able to kind of maneuver himself out of the hot water that he gets into with Lisa and Candace. But for the most part, what I thought might be bad for him actually ends up working out. And I don't think this vote against Lisa makes Rob look bad amongst the faithfuls. I just think that it was risky, because now Lisa can decide to just start going after him, which is always scary. My biggest worry for Rob would be, will he be able to smooth things over with Lisa so she doesn't start planting seeds of suspicion about him? Rob says that this is a pivotal moment in the game for him, and I think it is. He also says it's not going to look weird to the rest of the house of him voting against Lisa because he was so closely aligned with Colton, which is true. I think the only thing that Rob would have to be a little bit nervous about regarding the Lisa vote would be Lisa coming after him. But I also think maybe Rob thought that Lisa might be banished at the round table anyways, and maybe he thought that this would look good as he was on the right side of the vote to get out a traitor, because we will see that the vote comes down to a tie between Lisa and Ron, and Mark is basically the deciding vote that banishes Ron. Lisa is saved by a hair. Because Colton almost had the votes to get Lisa out, I'm thinking maybe Rob thought that the votes were there and it wouldn't have been so bad if he had voted for Lisa and Lisa was banished anyway. So I don't think this move was detrimental to Rob at all. I mean, obviously it wasn't, because he is able to do so well in this game, but I do think it was a bit of a risky move. I think why he took a little bit of this risk was because he was playing a little bit emotionally in this moment, because I think he liked Ron so much and he didn't want to vote against Ron. But after this moment is where we really see Rob focus in, and this sort of emotional gameplay doesn't really come into play anymore, as he just really starts to play the game from a gamer headspace. And Rob does worry about, obviously, Lisa and Candace's reactions to this, as he says,
This is about to be bad for Robbie Bobby.
Rob, Lisa, and Candace are able to find a minute alone after the round table, and obviously Lisa and Candace are upset with Rob, but Rob tells them that it would have looked bad for him to vote out Ron because everybody knew that he trusted Ron, and it would have looked bad for him to vote out Colton because everybody knows that he's in an alliance with Colton, so there was nothing else he could have done. In this moment, Rob explains to Lisa and Candace that he is thinking ahead. He says the game is about longevity, and it would have looked bad for him to vote against somebody that he said publicly that he trusted, which I think is true. Overall, everything ends up working out for Rob anyway, but I do think if he wanted to play it a little bit safer, he could have. He took a risk, and I think the main reason for the risk in this situation was mostly because he liked Ron so much. The next episode is the banquet, where another murder in plain sight is about to go down, and here Rob gets lucky as Lisa is the one who is basically taking charge in this murder, as she has to get somebody to touch this amulet that that she's wearing on her dress. And it was decided the night before in the turret that it would look least suspicious for Lisa to wear the amulet. And this is where a bit of luck, I think, is involved in the Traitors, because of course it would look a little bit suspicious if somebody like Rob was wearing basically a brooch. So he got lucky in the fact that he was not the one who had to take charge in this murder. And while this whole scene was fun to watch, and while this was a fun moment for Lisa, this will end up putting her in hot water. Not exactly because of the brooch, but I think because she was the one with the most pressure and with the most risk in this scenario. Even though the Traitors had previously planned to banish Ron and then murder Colton, because of this murder in plain sight, Lisa says that it would be too suspicious for Colton to be murdered, especially after he pushed so hard for her at the round table, because the murder would get pinned back on her. So because of this, she can't exactly murder Colton. I also think it would have been harder for Lisa to do the murder in plain sight with Colton, because I don't think there was any way Lisa could have slyly got Colton to touch the brooch without Colton being suspicious of what she was trying to do. So I do think pivoting from trying to murder Colton was the way to go. And honestly, with these murders in plain sight, sometimes I think it just ends up being, who can I trick in this moment? And it becomes less about strategy of who do we actually want to murder. In one of the most dramatic and also hilarious scenes of the show, we see Alan dramatically pointing that Jam Jam is the one that had got murdered. And as two henchmen drag Jam Jam out of the banquet, Jam Jam is screaming that Lisa is the one who murdered him because Lisa kissed him on the cheek. So while Jam Jam was on the right path because Lisa was the one to murder him, it wasn't because of the kiss on the cheek, which is really unfortunate for Lisa, as now everyone is going to be suspicious of Lisa. And there's a lot of talk about whether this was fair to let Jam Jam speak after he was murdered. While I do think it was good TV and it was fun to watch, I don't think it was exactly fair because of Jam Jam yelling so much after the murder that it was Lisa, Lisa killed me. People just automatically believe him because they say, well, why would he lie? He was already out of the game. He wouldn't lie if he was out of the game. Whereas if Jam Jam had just been talking about this before the murder, if he had just said, hey, if I get murdered, I think it's probably Lisa, I would think that's totally fair, because people might have been suspicious anyways of saying, well, Jam Jam was going after Lisa anyway. But it's the fact that a lot of people believe that this statement is true because Jam Jam basically says it on his way out, and they think he would have no reason to lie on his way out. It's not exactly fair, but I mean, it was entertaining TV. So after this moment, Rob says that Jam Jam basically signed Lisa's death warrant, and because of this, he's not going to be sticking his neck out for Lisa, which I do think is a smart move on Rob's part. This is where we start to see a shift in Rob's gameplay as he really starts to play the game a little bit more aggressively. The next day, he decides to actually go after Lisa instead of just sitting back and letting things happen. He tells Steven, Mark, and Maura that the way Lisa reacted at the banquet was odd, and he says that Jam Jam would have no reason to lie on his way out. So Lisa is probably the one who's lying about the whole kiss on the cheek thing. He also tells these three not to say anything about him being suspicious of Lisa because he's scared that Lisa is going to murder him. This is a very fun move for Rob. People were already suspicious of Lisa now after the whole banquet situation, and I think him also stating to people that he too has his suspicions against Lisa makes him look more like a faithful in a lot of people's eyes. Also, him telling people to stay quiet about his suspicions makes him look like he's scared to get murdered, and it also helps to not get back around to Lisa so quickly that he's actually going after her now. At the next mission, the top players get the chance to compete for this dagger, which will give them an extra vote in one of the upcoming round tables. Rob did the best in the mission, so he gets an advantage over the other 5 players in their little game for the dagger, and then he ends up actually winning the dagger. Rob didn't have to tell anybody that he had the dagger, although Natalie knew for certain because the way the game was played, Natalie had the dagger. Rob found out she was lying about it and Rob took it from her, so Natalie could have told everybody that she knew Rob had the dagger and people probably would have believed her anyway. Rob decides to gather everyone together before going back to the castle, tell them that he has the dagger, but he wants to work with them because he trusts them all. He says, we're all faithfuls here, and let's not tell anybody which one of us has it. That way we could use it to our advantage later on. I think this was a really smart move for Rob, as it didn't make him look suspicious, and it also built trust among the other people in this Dagger 6. They are viewing Rob as a faithful and also somebody who might use the dagger to help their agendas later on. Rob was lucky to get the dagger, but this was also a great situation for him to be in with the other players who just so happen to be competing for the dagger. The other players in the Dagger 6 are Eric, Colton, Steven, Mark, and Natalie, who I think are also all sort of seen as faithfuls at this point in time, and they all trust each other. So this decision by Rob to gather everybody together in order for them to stick together only built more trust among these other 5 players with him. Rob's reasoning behind the Dagger 6 sticking together was because he was scared that if people found out he had the dagger, he would be the one that would be murdered. So it also got people to protect him or to feel like they're protecting him by keeping quiet about who has the dagger. Johnny tells Candace that he's suspicious of Lisa, and then Candace goes to warn Lisa. When the Dagger 6 get back from their little challenge, Rob finds out that Natalie's name has been coming up and has really been being pushed by Candace and Lisa. Candace and Lisa obviously want to shift the heat onto Natalie in order to save Lisa. But at this point in time, with Natalie trusting Rob so much and now her being a part of the Dagger 6, Rob views Natalie as an important number for him. And we'll find out later on in the postseason interviews, people talk that Natalie was so ride or die for Rob. So she's another important piece that Rob wants to keep around, because at the end of the day, whether you're a faithful or a traitor, the Traitors is a numbers game, and it's really important to keep your numbers around. So it makes sense why Rob wouldn't want Lisa or Candace going after Natalie, an important person for his game. And Natalie is gaining a lot of suspicions because at the banquet, she fought so hard in order to get the antidote because she thought she was the one that was getting murdered in plain sight, and people saw that as being really suspicious. She also had a slip up, much like Portia did at the beginning of the game, where she said something like, "when we murdered," and Lisa is really trying to use this slip up against her too. At the round table, Natalie and Lisa are obviously kind of pushing for each other. Natalie tells Lisa that Lisa doesn't care whether she's a faithful or a traitor. She only cares about taking the heat off of her, and she only cares about getting Natalie to go home in order to save her own self. Jam Jam placing the blame on Lisa as he left the banquet also comes up at this round table, and people say it doesn't serve him to do that. He was already out of the game. This is also where I think a lot of people find this as unfair, as it is seen as Jam Jam 100% telling the truth in that moment. Instead of sitting back, Rob for the first time really decides to go after someone at the round table, and that person is Lisa. I'm wondering if Rob really decided to go after Lisa at this point in time was to kind of make sure that Lisa was banished, because he was scared that he had already written Lisa's name down, and he was scared maybe Lisa would start eventually to come after him as revenge, and maybe he wanted to make sure Lisa left for real this time, but he is really pushing for her at the round table. He brings up Jam Jam's argument, of course, saying Jam Jam would have no reason to lie, and he also brings up the things that Lisa said in regards to Jam Jam's comment at the banquet, because at first she says the kiss on the cheek didn't happen, and then she said, well, she doesn't remember. Her switching up like this only makes her look really suspicious. At this round table, Candace does a throwaway vote against Rob. She's obviously really mad that Rob is going after Lisa. This is a big thing that I'm surprised doesn't come up more later, as people will honestly believe this was a throwaway vote, even after Candace will eventually start going after Rob and will vote against him again, and even after people will eventually find out that Candace is a traitor. Nobody thinks anything about these votes against Rob, which if I was playing the game of the traitors, one of the first things I would do after somebody is revealed to be a traitor is to look back and say, oh, remember when she weirdly voted against Rob? Maybe that could be something. But for the rest of the game, nobody will even believe that this is even an inkling of something. This is one of the main things that I thought, oh, for sure, this is going to get Rob in trouble later. And nothing comes of it because people are so invested in Rob at this point that they truly just believe that Candace was trying to come up with a random throwaway vote because she didn't want to vote for Lisa. It's kind of crazy. Also, on an unrelated note, after Lisa's banishment, there is this hilarious music cue, and there are some pretty funny music cues throughout the Traitors. They try to pick these really dramatic songs, but the lyrics are so specific sometimes that it's really funny. And in this situation, Lisa is banished, and there's just music cue that just goes, "An icon falls." It is so funny.
An icon falls.
And at the end of the episode, before they go to bed, Colton tells Moore and Rob that he is now suspicious of Candace because of the way that she was protecting Lisa at the round table, thinking that she's probably trying to protect Lisa because she is also a traitor. This information is really important to Rob, and choosing not to share it with Candace is going to help him later. In the turret, Rob tells Candace that as a person, he feels bad for what he did to Lisa, but as a player, Lisa had to go. Throughout this last episode, we have seen this sort of shift in Rob where he has moved towards playing a more aggressive style of game and an even more strategic style of game, not letting anything emotional get to him anymore. Rob is upset about Candace voting against him at the round table, so he chooses not to tell her the information that Colton is coming after her. Because Lisa was murdered, Alan offers Rob and Candace whether they want to murder somebody or to recruit somebody new. Both Rob and Candace don't want to recruit somebody at this point in time. Candace is scared to recruit somebody because she doesn't want Rob getting one of his followers in the turret to help go after her. Candace wants to murder Colton, and Rob tries to tell Candace that they need Colton around because he's one of the loudest people in the game, and that is very good to take the heat off them. Also, Colton is a good number for Rob to have around, as Colton is one of Rob's loyal people that trust him. But Rob wants to look more like a team player in Candace's eyes and like he's apologizing for what he did to Lisa, so he lets Candace take the lead in choosing who to murder. And the fact that Candace is about to choose to murder Colton is actually going to help him in the long run because Colton was going around and saying her name, and now that he is dying, when everybody finds out that Colton is dead, it is going to lead a trail of breadcrumbs right back to Candace. But at this point in time, Candace doesn't know this, and Rob is just letting her fall into this trap. At breakfast the next day, Maura says she's suspicious about Candace because of her throwaway vote, which every time somebody brings this up, I'm like, on the edge of my seat because they're almost there. They're so close, but they just never get there with these types of things. Maura finds the throwaway vote suspicious, but Johnny comes to Candace's defense saying that he thinks she really just didn't want to vote for a housewife, and it really truly was a throwaway vote. We find out that Colton is murdered, and Candace speaks more about this to the cameras, saying she really wanted to murder Colton in order to cut that alliance between Colton and Rob. She says that Rob used Colton to go after Lisa, and she's scared that Rob would use him to go after her too. So she thinks that getting rid of Colton is this great move for her. However, Rob says that letting Candace get rid of Colton is just going to paint a bigger target on Candace's back because people know that Colton was suspicious of her. At this point in time, Candace does not know this. So the move is actually better on Rob's part, even though he is losing a good number for him. But I mean, at this point in time, he also already has so many other people that are really loyal to him, so it didn't matter as much. Throughout this next day, Candace is trying to plant seeds against Rob and sway people into looking at Rob, but she really gets nowhere with any of her arguments. And I truly do not see how people do not look at these moments later on to be suspicious of Rob, as first Candace says that the vote was just a throwaway vote, then the next day she's pushing for Rob. Nobody wants to go for Rob because they all love him. He's got a lot of people wrapped around his finger at this point in time, but I don't understand how people don't put two and two together once they realize that Candace was a traitor, that maybe it was suspicious why she was going after Rob was because he was also a traitor. And I think in other seasons, this has happened where people have clocked when a traitor has gone after another traitor, but they just don't get there with this, even though to me it seems like an obvious thing that you should be thinking about as a faithful. But people are so blinded by Rob at this point that they just don't see a world and where this could be suspicious, even after finding out the evidence that Candace is a traitor. Rob also found out that Candace is starting to push for him, so this gives him the ammo to go after her. And so he starts telling people that Colton was suspicious of Candace the night before in order to paint a bigger target on Candace's back. In this episode, Mark makes a comment of how he thinks there's gotta be a male up there as a traitor. And once again, we're seeing people on the right track, but just not getting there, as the male people will eventually start to look at is Steven for some reason. Along with Candace's name, Colton had also been saying Steven's name before he was murdered. And in the previous mission, Lisa chose to put her gold in Steven's chest. It was just a part of the mission, and Lisa knew she wasn't going to win. Steven asked her for her gold in order to have a chance to play for the dagger. But now people are starting to see this as suspicious, thinking maybe Steven and Lisa were working together because Steven's a traitor, because they didn't really see Lisa and Steven hanging out a lot in the castle. Candace asked Dorinda and Johnny to give her a moment alone with Steven, which also makes Candace look suspicious in Dorinda's eyes. In this conversation, Steven warns Candace that Colton was saying her name the night before, and Candace tries to get Steven into thinking that Rob was a traitor by saying Rob was puppeteering Colton. The way that Candace was trying to plant seeds against Rob, but absolutely nobody is taking the bait, is kind of funny. I think she might be going about it a little bit wrong because Colton was so out in the open and vocal, and it just didn't make sense to anybody that Colton was being controlled or puppeteered by Rob. People are so blind to thinking that Rob is a faithful at this point that nobody is getting swayed by Candace trying to push for Rob, unfortunately for Candace. Rob then comes in the room and asks Steven for a private moment with Candace, and Steven doesn't think anything of this. I don't know why, Dorinda was suspicious when Candace asked for a private moment with someone. So I said, oh, it's kind of suspicious when two people are so secretively talking. But then when Rob comes in and is talking to Candace for a bit on his own and they ask for a private moment, Steven doesn't find this suspicious, especially between Rob and Candace, as they're not two people that were typically looked like that they were aligned or talking to each other a lot in the eyes of a lot of the other people in the castle. So the fact that they so openly had this traitor little argument here and nobody really noticed it is kind of crazy. Candace, now just finding out that Colton was saying her name the night before, questions Rob, asking if he knew Colton was saying her name and he didn't tell her in order to trick her into murdering Colton so the murder can be pinned on her, that's exactly what he did. But Rob denies this, saying that he didn't know. Candace is not buying it, and she calls Rob a snake. And in this conversation, Candace kind of warns Rob that because of all this, she's going for him at the round table. Rob having a good warning that Candace is coming for him makes him extremely prepared for this round table. I mean, nobody was really looking at Rob anyway, but the way that he stays calm through Candace gunning for him is very important to the way that people viewed him. He says before the round table that his plan is to stay calm while trying to get Candace as riled up as possible. He says that the people that look more riled up at the round table end up looking more guilty. And he's right. This is a great plan, thinking ahead going into the round table. And it works out for him. Even though Candace is going to be really coming for him at the round table, in prior seasons, if this were to happen later on down the line, we would see that the traitor would start to get suspicions from moments like these. But nothing about this moment will follow Rob into the later stages of the game, which is really surprising. Candace goes after Rob at the round table, and one of her bits of suspicions that she brings up about him is the fact that he dropped his fork at breakfast time, which I find really funny. She doesn't really have much to present to everybody about why Rob would be a traitor. At this round table, Maura asks Candace why she said that her vote yesterday against Rob was a throwaway vote, but now it seems like she's pushing so hard to actually go for Rob. And it's another instance of she's right there, like she's so close, but she just can't get there in order to figure it out, because it is suspicious why Candace said it was just a throwaway vote, but now it's not anymore. To any of the players that are left, this just does not click in their brain as something that's suspicious, even though Maura points it out and even asks Candace about this moment. And once the players find out that Candace is a traitor, this should be setting off a little bit of an alarm bell in their heads, as this was suspicious for a reason. Watching these faithfuls get so close and to be asking the right questions is so funny, but also a little bit frustrating to watch. At the round table, Candace obviously votes for Rob again, saying that everybody needs to start looking at the people who are unassuming and quiet. After the round table, Rob is worried, saying it's only a matter of time before somebody connects those dots of Candace's 2 votes against him. And that's exactly what I was thinking while watching the show, except for the faithfuls that are left just cannot connect these dots. And it's crazy that Rob kind of walks away from these moments scot-free, when in prior seasons, this would have been like a traitor sort of dragging another traitor down in a sense. Instead of being suspicious about Candace voting against Rob, people have turned their attention to Johnny, because in the last mission, Candace said that Johnny should go for the shield, or Johnny should get the shield because he hadn't gotten one yet. And people are starting to think that maybe Candace was pushing for Johnny to get safety because they're traitors working together. So everyone is about to get distracted with the Johnny suspicions, and nobody is going to be thinking about Rob. At the end of the episode, Kristen is speculating on things, and she says that Candace didn't leave them anything except for Rob, but there's no way it could be Rob, that sweet, sweet man.
Candace, and she didn't leave us with anything except for Rob, which I don't.
No.
There's no way. That sweet, sweet man.
Even Kristen is clocking these clues that Candace left them, but she just cannot in any way see Rob being a traitor. And we will see in some of Kristen's post-game interviews, she said that Rob was really good at being consistent in the way he acted the entire time. So she was never suspicious of Rob at all of being a traitor, because he always stayed the same way, level-headed, laid back, but outspoken when he needed to be. He never had a shift in his demeanor that made her suspicious of him. And it was that consistency that really put Rob as a faithful in her eyes. At the end of the episode, Rob has to recruit somebody and he chooses Eric. This, I think, was a great choice that will work out so well for him in the end, because over the course of this season, Rob has sort of been building his little army of followers, and now he will be having somebody in the turret that is going to be working with him that he can also control. Because a lot of people said, well, Rob could have picked maybe somebody like Mark, but I do think that in the turret, Mark would be wanting to push for his own agenda, whereas Eric was the kind of person that Rob knew would let him take the reins over the rest of the murders and everything. So having Eric in the turret gave Rob full control of who was being murdered, while also there's still one traitor in front of him as a shield, if that makes sense. That's how I looked at it in my eyes. Now, Rob says that he really wanted to work with Eric for most of the time, and I think he did because he needed to take Eric to the end with him because he needed Eric's vote, basically, and the Traitors is a numbers game, and Eric being convinced that Rob wanted to take him to the end and split the money with him, that's a locked-in vote for Rob at the end. So, of course, Rob wants to keep Eric safe until the end. Very smart choice overall in terms of choosing to recruit Eric. A big part of this season is really about how clueless these faithfuls are, because once Eric gets recruited, you would think he would be cautious about trusting Rob, since he just saw that Rob so heavily went after Lisa and then Candace, who were his fellow traitors. And the fact that Eric is so quick to trust Rob and he's not scared that Rob could do the same thing to him is kind of crazy. With a lot of these other players this season, I just want to shake them and tell them to wake up and look at the clues that are so obviously right in front of them. And Eric, finding out that Rob was a traitor, had so much information there, but he really kind of fumbles as a traitor and lets Rob take the reins. And I think he thinks, well, Rob's going to take me to the end and then I'm going to win the money. But obviously that wasn't the case. Rob's plan for this next episode is to support the people that are going heavily against Johnny, so he doesn't take any heat from Candace's votes against him at the round table. And it's working because people are so distracted by being suspicious of Johnny that nobody's even thinking about Candace voting against Rob twice in a row. At breakfast, Maura says she is so surprised because she was sure Rob was going to get murdered after Candace pushed so hard to go after him. Once again, Maura and some of the other faithfuls are so close. They're asking the right questions and they're thinking about the right things, but they just can't come up with the answer that should be right in front of them. We find out that Rob and Eric decided to murder Dorinda, and Dorinda was another one of Rob's loyal numbers, but as we're getting down to the end game, pretty much most of the people left, I think besides Johnny and Tara really, are part of Rob's loyal numbers. So he didn't really need Dorinda anymore. Murdering Dorinda looked less suspicious on him because people knew that him and Dorinda were friends and allies. And as we will come to find out in the Traitors podcast, Dorinda was interviewed after she was eliminated, and she talks about how so enchanted she was by Rob and some of the other people in the castle, including Maura and Natalie, and how they were just so ride or die for him and they loved him so much. Like, he had these people under a spell for real, because even after Dorinda is murdered, she says on the podcast that she's not even mad about Rob, and she actually had butterflies when hearing what he said about her being an ally of his and that fact that she trusted him. And she's like,
oh, he said I trusted him and I was a good ally.
And it's like, Dorinda, wake up, wake up. These people are so under his spell at this point in the game. It is so crazy how Rob was able to get so many people to just absolutely love him.
She really trusts me and she's my ally. I'm like, that's enough for me.
You better than me.
The murder. I'm getting murdered and I have butterflies.
Dorinda, what are we doing?
You know, Rob would say the nice, like at breakfast, he'd be like, oh, you know, you look so beautiful today, Mrs. Matthew. I'm like, that's it, I'll never murder you. He had the loyalty, especially of me Maura and Natalie.
We see that Johnny is suspicious of Steven because of the moment in the last episode where Candace had asked for a moment alone with him. We also see that Eric is a nervous wreck as a traitor, but he is commenting on how good Rob is at appearing relaxed and nonchalant, and I think that also helped with nobody thinking that Rob could ever possibly be a traitor. It's why people like Kristen were never suspicious of him. The next challenge involves the traitors answering questions and then the players having to try and match their answers with what the traitors said. Rob and Eric decide to say Tara for every answer in order to not really answer the questions so the answers can't get traced back to either of them, which I think is a pretty smart move, but it's not as fun to watch as the faithfuls who could have had some breadcrumbs to go off of within this mission. They now have absolutely nothing. And it makes Johnny and Tara look more suspicious because there's a moment at the end where everyone says, let's just choose Tara because obviously that's what the traitors are doing. And Johnny and Tara don't. Everybody is now even more suspicious of either one or both of them being a traitor. Rob and Eric also get to choose 4 people to shortlist for murder, and they choose Johnny and Tara as part of the shortlist to make Johnny and Tara look suspicious, as if one or both of them were traitors, they were putting themselves in there to look more innocent. So it works out with the fact that Rob wants to keep the distraction onto Johnny so nobody is thinking about him after the Candace situation. Tara and Johnny decide to tell everybody at the round table that they're besties, and a very strange moment that I think was a strange move for them. It did work out in neither Tara or Johnny were banished at this round table. They actually swayed people over towards Steven, but the fact that they stayed apart from each other the entire game and then decided to tell everybody that they were actually super close only made both of them look suspicious in everybody else's eyes. After this roundtable where Steven is banished, Kristen is now becoming suspicious of Eric because he has been really quiet at the last several roundtables, including this most recent one. He didn't say a single thing. Kristen accuses Eric of acting strangely, and I don't think Eric does a good job of defending himself here. He doesn't have much to say on this, and I think Eric really could have defended himself better if he brought up the man with the magic ears debacle, where he was basically the final nail in Tiffany's coffin. Eric could have said, I just have been scared to speak up because I don't want to have another situation like I did to Tiffany because I felt so guilty about Tiffany. But Eric does not use this to save him in this case, and Kristen is very suspicious of him. Rob wants to murder Kristen, which will only put a little bit of heat on Eric, but he convinces Eric to do it. I think Rob chose Eric because Rob knew that Eric would go along with whatever he wanted to do in the turret, even though this move is not great for Eric. Rob promises to back Eric up. I think they were just most worried about Mark because Kristen and Mark were close. Kristen had told Mark about her suspicions of Eric. This murder can get pinned back on Eric, but Rob says that all they gotta worry about is Mark and it will be fine. I do think that at this point in time, Rob wasn't using this to throw Eric to the wolves. Rob's strategy was to take Eric to the end with him because Eric was a for sure locked in vote with him, as Eric thought that they were going to be splitting the money together. At the start of the next episode, we get more instances of Maura talking about how she trusts Rob the most. She even tells Rob that if she found out he was a traitor, she would turn around and die. At this point, Maura has been for many episodes 100% on the Rob train, but I think the edit is only confirming this for us. And if he can keep both Maura and Eric around, then he has that final fire of truth locked in, and he has the win locked in because these are 2 for sure votes with him at the final fire. At breakfast, everybody finds out that Kristen was the next one to be murdered, and I do think taking out people like Kristen and Mark at this point in the game was really important for Rob's setup in the end game, because the players like Kristen and Mark are so for sure faithfuls in everybody's eyes. Like, nobody had ever suspected Kristen or Mark of being any type of suspicious throughout most of the game. Everybody just kind of thought they were faithful, and having people like that at the end game is really hard because there's no way that you could convince anybody to vote against them. It's important because when voting against some of these other people, you can convince somebody like Maura to vote against Tara and Johnny because Tara and Johnny have been suspicious, but it'll be a little bit harder to convince people to go against Mark or Kristen. So keeping Mark and Kristen around was important for Rob's gameplay, but at the end, you don't want those for sure 100% traitor people really there just in case anything were to go wrong. Also, taking out Kristen was a good move for Rob because if anything were to go wrong with the Kristen murder, it would just get pinned on Eric. Tara starts to suspect Rob in this episode and she brings it up to Natalie. She's starting to think about the Candace situation and it is seeming suspicious to her. Natalie is also being swayed by Tara because Natalie says she's been thinking, why is she still around in the game? She's the only gamer left, and she didn't have a lot of allies really besides Rob, who she 100% trusted, and she's starting to think that the only reason why she has made it so far in this game and has not been murdered is because of her relationship to Rob, and Rob is sort of her traitor's angel that has been keeping her safe because she's a number for him. So finally, people are starting to look at the game from a different perspective and to be asking the right question. Natalie now, knowing that Tara is also suspicious of Rob, is on board with going for Rob. Even though most of the time Natalie was ride or die for Rob, Natalie has that gamer mindset where towards the end of the game, if you're faithful and you haven't been murdered, you have to start asking the question, why am I here and who might be keeping me around? Natalie is now correctly assuming the answers to these really important questions. Mark is not suspicious of Rob at all. He is suspicious of Eric because of Kristen's murder, but Rob obviously wants to keep Eric around, so his plan for the day is to convince Mark and everybody to go after Natalie. And Rob starts to fuel the fires against Natalie by telling Mark that Natalie was one of the only people that didn't vote for Candace. She voted for Tara at that round table. Natalie has the why am I here conversation with Maura. I think Natalie is trying to get Maura to see that maybe we're both in the same boat as we're both close to Rob, and that could be why we have been around for so long. And Maura says she's been asking the same questions too. Why am I here? Why have I not been murdered yet? But Maura just does not believe in any universe that Rob could be a traitor, even though she says she's asking herself these questions. But she is not really thinking too hard into answering them because she does not want to believe that Rob is somebody she can't trust. It's so frustrating to watch because Maura multiple times feels like she's on the right track with something, but she just never fully gets there. Natalie brings up the fact that Candace voted for Rob twice, and Maura defends Rob by saying she genuinely thinks Candace's first vote was a throwaway vote, and Candace was big on being consistent with her votes. So Maura believes that Candace voted for Rob the second time and went for Rob the second time in the name of consistency. Maura is jumping to any conclusion that will not lead to the fact that she can't trust Rob. And so in this conversation, she is even working hard to come to Rob's defense, even though Natalie is right in the Candace vote being suspicious. Maura specifically tells Natalie, it could not be Rob. She is so convinced.
It could not be Rob. But then if me and him were at the end and he was a traitor, I would probably storm out of the castle because I am so convinced.
However, Natalie is now dead set about going against Rob at the round table as everything is suddenly starting to add up to her. I think the choice for Rob and Eric to go after Natalie at the round table was an interesting one because I would have thought they would have went after one of Johnny or Tara simply because Johnny and Tara are now a locked duo that are always going to vote together, and that is kind of dangerous to take to the end, as the Traitors is a numbers game. I'm surprised that they went for Natalie. As far as the edit shows, at this point in time, before the roundtable, Rob was unaware that Natalie was going to be coming for him at the roundtable, so I do think that for the most part, Rob saw Natalie as one of his loyal followers. It does end up working out for Rob, as Natalie did come for him at the round table and had started to get suspicious of him. I just am very interested in the fact that both Rob and Eric chose to go after Natalie instead of Johnny or Tara in order to break that up. But maybe they had thought that Johnny and Tara were so suspicious to everybody that no one was ever going to let them get to the end and not banish at least one of them. So maybe that was their reasoning behind all this. And also with the next murder, they could possibly pin it on Johnny and Tara, as if Johnny and Tara are still in the game together, it's proof that one of them is possibly a traitor. That's probably their mindset going into the end game. I just thought it was an interesting choice overall to keep Johnny and Tara around so long, especially after finding out how tight of a duo they are. Tara, who was a catalyst for going against Rob at the beginning of the day, has now decided to change her mind. I truly do not understand Johnny and Tara's reasoning behind this, as they could have had a bit of the numbers. They're so scared because Rob has the dagger and this is his last day to use his dagger, his extra vote. But if they had stuck with their original plan, they could have had 4 votes. And this is what I think they could have done. Instead of going after Rob, Johnny and Tara said they were suspicious of both Rob and Eric. I don't think they could convince Mark to go after Rob, and they needed one more vote. But Mark was suspicious of Eric, and I do think they could have convinced Mark to go after Eric. And if they had Johnny, Tara, Natalie, and Mark all vote for Eric, the vote would have been a tie, with Eric, Maura, and Rob's 2 votes on the other side. I don't believe that after a tiebreaker, Rob would have been allowed to use his dagger again. So I think they would have had the chance to at least get a traitor out if they truly believed that Eric and Rob were the traitors. I don't think they were going to get Mark to go against Rob at this point in time, but they could have at least taken out Eric. They were so scared of Rob's dagger, they decide to change their mind and go after Natalie, which is horrible to see, because at the round table, it's like almost like Natalie was duped, because Tara was telling her at the beginning of the day that they should go after Rob, and then they completely switched up on her at the end of the day. I feel so bad for Natalie, but also you got to know that now Natalie is getting out of the game. One of them is going to be murdered. Johnny and Tara keep saying that they think it's Rob and Eric, and now they're setting themselves up to go into the final day with 2 less people and 2 people that they think are traitors, when they had the opportunity to get at least one of those people out. And even though Rob had the dagger, I do think they could have had a tie. And then I don't know exactly what the rules are, but I don't think Rob would have been allowed to use his dagger on the tiebreaker. They could have at least gotten a traitor out, and then only one of them would have been murdered going into the next day, but they would have still had the numbers. But by changing their minds at this roundtable and choosing to go after Natalie, although they said they didn't think she was a traitor, they're only getting out a number that they needed in the long run. It was such a bad move on Johnny and Tara's part, because in the next day, in the final episode, they will try their best to go after Rob and Eric, but at this point it's too late. Rob has Eric and Maura locked in, and Johnny and Tara just don't have the numbers to go against them at the end. Anyways, at the round table, people bring up Natalie being suspicious because she's the last gamer left. As I talked about in my earlier traitor video, where I focused a lot on the Big Brother players, being painted as a gamer is a bad thing within the traitors. And now we see how, now that they want to banish Natalie, they're saying, well, she's a gamer and she's the last one left, and she probably is the reason why all the gamers got murdered at the beginning of the game. The other faithfuls believing this argument is crazy to me, because it wouldn't make sense for somebody to take out their own numbers at the beginning of the game. And people like Mark say, well, it would have been smart because nobody would suspect the gamers taking out other gamers, but the gamers were Natalie's allies. They were people that were going to work with her. I don't think at the beginning of the game it would make sense for any traitor to be taking out people that were their allies and were working with them and were numbers for them. I don't understand how this argument gets made throughout this season because it doesn't make sense, but they are using this as an excuse and as another suspicion to paint Natalie as a possible traitor. Johnny even says that she's good at these games because she plays these games for a living and stuff like that, to which I say, Johnny was out here trying to form an alliance and rally the troops just a few episodes ago to get Colton out, but because Natalie comes from the world of Survivor, it looks worse, even though the other faithfuls have been playing the game and have been trying to play the game strategically, much like everybody else. Although they haven't been doing too good of a job at it, but they're still thinking like gamers. It just annoys me when gamers get painted in a negative light just because they came from other gaming shows. Natalie gets banished, and this works out excellently for Rob because Johnny and Tara turning on Natalie so publicly is only going to make them look worse going into the last episode. Now Johnny is starting to tell Tara that he really thinks Eric and Rob are the traitors, but at this point it's too late for them, as there's no way they are going to be able to get Rob and Eric out now, as they just lost a number and they're about to lose another number going into this next night. This leads us to the next episode where Mark is murdered. Eric and Rob had discussed whether they should murder Mark or one of Johnny and Tara to break them up. Again, the reason why they chose Mark over Johnny and Tara is probably because Johnny and Tara already look suspicious in everyone's eyes, and the fact that they've made it so far into the game only makes people like Maura even more sure that one of them has to be a traitor. And also, Mark is one of those people that nobody had suspected to ever be a traitor, so it's good to not have those type of people around at the end. Rob talks about Maura being his pivotal piece going into this last episode. He just needs her to vote out Johnny and Tara, and he basically has the game won at that point. Johnny is finally seeing that their decision to banish Natalie has been a bad one, and maybe they should have stuck to their guns the night before. Exactly. He also talks with Tara before the mission about possibly splitting up during the mission in order to be able to have more time alone with someone like Maura. And I think this could have been a great strategy had Johnny and Tara had pushed for this to happen before the mission, because what we will come to see is Maura and Rob will spend most of the day together as they are paired up together for the mission, and Johnny, Tara, and Eric are in the other group, and this does not do any good for Johnny and Tara, as at least if they had split up Maura and Rob, one of them could have been trying to talk to Maura and to get into her head all day, meanwhile keeping her away from Rob being able to convince her and sway her into doing what he wants. It could have been an interesting move towards the end of the game, but at this point, I don't think there was any way Maura was ever going to not go with Rob to the end. So even if that did happen, it probably wouldn't have mattered anyways. I just find it interesting that Johnny and Tara talk about this, and I think it would have been a useful strategy. And then they didn't do it. They just let Maura and Rob go on the helicopter, practically spend the whole day together. It does nothing for their games. Although I don't think there was much that could have been done, but they could have at least tried. And they didn't try here. Tara and Johnny do try to sway Maura after the mission, but I fear it is way too little and way too late for them, because there's no way you're going to be swaying Maura. At this point in time, Maura was suspicious of Eric, but she was never going to go against Rob. And if they wanted to go against Eric and Rob, they really needed to go into the finals with the numbers, and because they didn't stick to their guns at the last round table, they don't have the numbers. at all. Maura seems like she's convinced that Eric could be a traitor, and I think this is thanks to Johnny and Tara kind of putting this idea into her head, and she's very adamant about wanting to go after Eric. But I think during their day together, Rob had convinced Maura and promised her that if they just go after Johnny and Tara first, that then they can go after Eric at the end. So Maura goes along with this, as we will see. And it's also another reason why I think Rob turned on Eric at the end. Rob said that he was always going to try and get the full money for himself, and I don't blame him. But even if Rob wanted to split the money with Eric, he wouldn't have been able to because Maura was suspicious of Eric, and there was no way that Maura was going to let Rob and Eric both be at the end. She didn't trust Eric, so there was no path for Rob to win the game with Eric unless they had taken out Maura together, but that was never going to happen either. I mean, Rob was going for the money. So Eric feeling so betrayed by Rob, sure, but a little bit of that was the fact that Eric wasn't getting past that final fire of truth because Maura just didn't trust him. So Johnny gets banished at the final round table. Then Rob and Maura kind of celebrate, and Rob promises her that they are going to be the final two. And technically, he did keep his promise as they did get to the final two, but Maura is so sure she's winning the game with Rob at this point. The secondhand embarrassment I have for Maura, I do feel bad for her in this ending here because they go into the final fire of truth with Tara and Eric, and Rob has a for sure voting block as he has 3 votes against Tara to get her out of there, and then he has his for sure vote that he has been stringing along the entire game of Maura to go against Eric, which guarantees his win. Basically, from the time they got Johnny out going into the end with the players that he went with was a for sure win. It was so amazing to watch because Rob had set himself up along the way in order to get this win. And at the end of the game, we see Rob and Maura, and Rob has to reveal to Maura that he is in fact a traitor, and she almost is like in disbelief the entire time because she was so sure on him the entire time that he wasn't lying to her, and she thinks he's joking, and he has to tell her multiple times, I'm not joking, I'm a traitor. It is heartbreaking for her, but I guess in the long run things worked out because Rob said he would make it up to her by buying her a Birkin bag, and in recent news that I discovered, Maura actually did get that Birkin bag from Rob, so I guess she's happy. And we also got to see a great game with Rob Roush taking control of the Traitors, playing in a gamer mindset and winning the game, and I think that's why I had so much fun watching this season of the Traitors. Not only were there really great entertaining moments, but I think Rob was one of the best traitors I've seen on these US seasons in a long while. I think my favorite traitor has to be Suri, but Rob is probably number 2 for me with the way that he was so easily able to charm everybody to get them to be his loyal followers, his loyal cult, and he was working the entire time to set himself up for that end game. He wasn't afraid to play aggressively when he needed to turn it on and to go after a Lisa or a Candace. And a little bit of it was luck with how dumb some of the other faithfuls were. Things that should have been an obstacle for him going into the end of the game, like the Candace votes, were not even a problem because people just loved Rob so much that they did not want to see a world in which these Candace votes meant that they should be suspicious of Rob. It was such an interesting watch just seeing people be so blinded by their trust for Rob. And a lot of the players, including Dorinda and Kristen, have talked about this as they came out, as they didn't think there was any way Rob could have been a traitor. Mark did not think there was any way Rob could have been a traitor. And even his decision to pull Eric in was such a smart decision because he knew he could control Eric in the turret. A lot of the more strategic players that would have been bigger obstacles to his game, he got rid of them early on. So all he was left with was this clueless line of loyal followers. The snake Wrangler became the ultimate snake, and he won the game, and it was so fun to watch.
Rob, you're
Snake. But well done.
At the beginning of the game, I was not on board with Rob Roush, but he got me on board along the way. Just because I didn't think he was going to have that sort of gamer strategic mindset, and I was proven wrong. And maybe that's also another reason why nobody suspected Rob could be a traitor, is because usually the Love Island people are not these strategic thinkers, and they don't have that sort of cutthroat gamer mindset. And so maybe nobody suspected Rob to be a traitor because he's coming from the world of Love Island, and that kind of puts him at an advantage for the way people perceive that sort of archetype versus, like I was talking about with the gamers, and the way that people perceive the gamer archetype as people that are cutthroat and strategic. Even though Rob was cutthroat and strategic, it wasn't something people were expecting from him, including me as a viewer when they first picked him. So I think that's why I wanted to really talk about Rob and highlight Rob, because I think he was an excellent traitor. He's a secret gamer, you know? He was somebody that I was tuning in to watch because he has that gamer mindset. He was playing strategically. He was thinking ahead. He played a great game socially, and he played a great game strategy wise. And I think he's definitely up there among the best US traders. So let me know what you thought of Rob and his gameplay, and what you thought of this season of The Traitors. And that's all I have for you today. So if you made it all the way to the end of this really long video and you liked this video, please give this video a like. Leave me a comment. If you're not already subscribed to me, click on my channel and check out some of my other stuff. And if you like that other stuff, you might want to subscribe to my channel so you always know when I post a new video. And with all that being said, thanks again for watching. I will see you in the next one.